Hello and welcome to this Harmony in Health podcast. I am Julia Outlaw, an Alexander's Technique teacher and member of the Harmony in Health team. And together we're exploring this concept of harmony, inner and outer, and how we can use ancient disciplines and modern techniques and wisdom to promote development and well-being. And today we are going to talk about being in harmony with the seasons and the impact that can have on your health and general well-being. And I think it's true that humans used to be more in touch with the seasons than we are now. So we're going to explore what traditions have been and are still around. And I'm joined today by three fabulous women. Firstly, Anne Andanis. She's originally from England, but she's lived in Norway for 40 years, so used to some very extreme seasons. She's a wonderful natural movement teacher and also teaches Pilates and swimming, aromatherapy, and she's a reflexologist. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you, Julia.
We also have Małgorzata Jabojska. I've probably said that wrong. Welcome. Małgorzata is in the world of theatre. She is a theatre researcher based in Poland, and she's at the moment completing her doctorate on biomechanics and actor training and is involved in many projects, helping and working with actors and performance. Welcome, Małgorzata.
Welcome, Julia.
And finally, we have Sara Carusi, who is an Alexander's Technique teacher and also a professional musician and singer. So she performs with her band and runs workshops and also the Orchestra of Unlimited Potential for Syrian asylum seekers. She's also a dancer. Sara's Iranian, was British born, but she can fill us in also about some of the ancient Persian traditions. Happy to have you, Sara.
Thank you, Julia. It's lovely to be here.
So connecting to the seasons. I mean, would you say that we're not so connected now to the seasons, and why could it be important? And maybe I'd ask you.
I think we have lost our connection to the seasons as we've brought ourselves indoors and used to warmth and electricity indoors and lighting, not least. So I think we need perhaps to think a little bit to how our ancestors used to live, and maybe not even so far as back as that, even our grandparents. And perhaps start thinking about reconnecting back to our surroundings once again.
And why is that important to reconnect with the seasons and surroundings?
Well, we are part of nature ourselves. Why should we distance ourselves from what we are is in our DNA, and that is to be part of our nature which surrounds us. Get back in touch with ourselves again. Think of how we move, how we eat, how we work, how we go through the seasons during our year, and what it does to us. We have forgotten.
Yes. And at the moment, obviously being winter and cold and very long nights, and it wasn't so easy to get food or travel or stay healthy. What do you think, Sara, Małgorzata, about our connection or disconnection with the seasons?
Well, we only have to take a walk, a very, very small, even just a 5-minute walk into some natural ground close to our home. It could be a park, it could be somewhere with a tree. And immediately we begin to feel something different within us. Something naturally wants to be in nature and wants to connect with our environment and our surroundings. And as Anne was saying, unfortunately, much of life these days doesn't provide that opportunity, especially with the pandemic. People are just stuck indoors, staring at these screens. And it doesn't take long before that feeling inside returns when we do connect with our environment. And we all know that feeling, and we begin to breathe. Our body begins to expand, which is its natural state. And then we're in a much better space in ourselves to actually connect with people around us and to work from.
Yes, I know when I get a walk outside, it changes the whole day, really. Małgorzata?
Well, I think those seasons that we dealt with for a long, long time shaped us, not only with our DNA, but also with our cultural, ritual traditions and activities, and actually shaped our societies. So coming back to it might help us also with our interconnectivity with society and our close people close to us, and our also social environment, not only our natural environment.
Interesting. Yeah, that connection, kind of community connection as well. Thinking about winter then, and it'd be great to hear from each of you. Maybe I'll go to Anne first, about Norway and the seasons there, and especially winter. What kind of beliefs do people have, or rituals, or traditions?
Well, how long have I got? I first arrived, I have to keep it short. I first arrived my first visit to Norway was in the mid-June, at the longest part of the highest part of the summer and the length of the days. So a day and night went into one. I didn't know if it was morning or night. It was the same. It was sunshine all the time. I then moved permanently. Well, when I first emigrated to Norway, it was the end of October, and I went to sleep. I literally went to sleep and didn't wake up until June, or May at least, yeah, when the sun appeared again. Because then the winters here are extreme. Midsummer is extreme, midwinter is extreme, and you feel you're almost a split personality. You become two different people: the summer you and the winter you. And it hit me specifically, not being born here. So it took quite a few years to accommodate this. So the seasons here I wondered how on earth people ever came up here to live in the first place. What had they done wrong to be sent up here? Why were they here? It's just look at the geography. It's long. It's extremely long country. Half of the country is above the Arctic Circle. It's extreme nature, mountains dividing, fjords, coastline. Communities could not have managed to pick up with each other during the winter season, very isolating. Food, where would they get food from in the winter? The fjords were iced over, nothing grew for many months. So what extreme life they must have had. So I looked into this and found all the folklore and traditions and started to try and understand how they came about. And I can understand completely. The darkness, it gives such a feeling of mystique, of yeah, darkness and dark moods and dark spirits, maybe. And they were very concerned about this, that they had the main season, festive season of the year was at midwinter, called Yule. And that is still Christmas. For us today, it is called Yule up here in Norway. They've kept the pagan term for it, which we haven't in English-speaking countries. So Yule was the main midwinter season, where after bringing in all the crops, the berries, the seeds, dried the fish, dried the meat, put all the food they could gather during the growing time away and stored away and brewed the beer. And before hunkering down for many months, they would have a big party and they would drink and be merry, because then they felt they would come closer to the gods. You have Odin, Frey. Yeah, that was getting closer in connection with their gods. And to protect them, and to make sure they would get through the winter, they would celebrate then the light and the return when this little tiny slither of light would start to return. This was a time to celebrate. It was also a time when they felt all the spirits, the underworld spirits, came to life again. And those who had died in an unnatural way, they would come out and have big processions, which you had to be very careful of to avoid, because there they would pillage and rape and steal all your beer and all which you had collected if you weren't careful. So this was very highly thought of. You had to protect yourself, but they would put tar across their front doors and carry steel, iron in put iron in their grain or in their pockets to frighten away these unhappy spirits which came to life at the darkest time of the year. You would also have visits from your ancestors who had died had a happier life, and they came back, and you encouraged them to come back, and you would put out food for them at the darkest time of the year. You would even have a bed waiting for them to come into and welcome them in, and that would bring you good luck for your farm for the coming year of season. So you had the unhappy spirits and the good spirits, but they all came out at midwinter, and you would protect and celebrate them in both ways you could. And this has carried on right up into after Christianity, and even today in some of the country areas, people put out bowls of porridge for the good spirits to put in their barn and secure a good harvest, or spring sowing and harvest the following season. So it is being carried on.
It kind of makes sense in a way, because they're facing this such long winter and it's dark, and that's when the spirits come and they need to prepare. What was the effect on people? And also, I'm interested on you then, sort of arriving in October, on health.
Yes, definitely. I always thought I was a fit and sporty person, and suddenly I had no energy, for example. And I hadn't cottoned on that this was what the reason was. I thought I was ill. The third winter season, after all my blood tests and everything proved fine, I realized what the connection was. So then I had to make sure and work with it and embrace actually the winter and find ways to help myself. And I think even in the UK, we are affected by the dark. A lot of us have noticed when the days get shorter, that we have a more melancholic frame of mind and lack of energy. So I have used a lot of light. I have bought lots of warm clothes, which we have to have here anyway. And I make sure I went out as much as I could in the day and was active in the day. Whether it's minus 10, 12, 20, I would get out there, with the children. The children go out as well. And I learned a lot from looking how the locals lived. And they just get on with life. You get out there, but you have to dress up. They have a saying here which says, there's no bad weather, there's only bad clothes.
Yes.
So and footwear is the most important thing. I've broken quite a few bones. You have to learn to walk like a penguin, and you have to wear, again, you get ice in England as well, I know, but just make sure you have good soles on your shoes, rubber, good softish rubber soles, and walk like a penguin to help you manage to get out there and enjoy. Take out a picnic. We still go to picnics in minus 10. You take
Wow.
warm cocoa and stuff. You can make it fun. You can find lots of fun things to do. Get out there, find a tree to climb in, or we don't always have snow in England, I know, like we have here, so we can do the snowing conditions, but you can still get out and enjoy the nature in the winter and find all the things you can do outside. It really, I promise you, it really helps you feel better in yourself during the winter months.
Amazing, practical, quite simple tips there, but they make all the
Very
difference.
simple. Simple is best, yeah.
Margazata, maybe I can come to you, because I imagine some of the traditions are quite similar in Poland, or what can you tell us?
Yes, we do have strong winters, used to have even stronger, and actually many of these traditions are similar. We also have at the 1st November, which is a very huge All Saints Day, is very huge holiday for Polish people, because this is the moment when we remember, of course, our ancestors, but they are actually come back to us, and they stay with us actually through the whole winter, until the spring, when they are waved goodbye with the spring traditions. But during the whole winter, they autumn and winter, they stay with us. And actually, they being with us is the moment where the veil between worlds, let's say, is a little bit thinner. The doors are a little bit ajar between those worlds, and they're coming to us and staying with us, help us to navigate with their wisdom, for example, that they help us navigate through our lives. We can make some activities with predicting the future. For example, on 30th of November, we have the St. Andrew's Day, which is typically a day to have some predictions about the future, of course, about husbands and wives and your future life and fortune. And this is because their presence of otherworldly or our ancestors, otherworldly creatures that come from the other side, is a little bit more tangible. And actually, these traditions about meeting or going and meeting people and staying together and having those activities in the community is actually very strong through the winter, because you don't have to get your crops, you don't have to manage your animals, you just have a time to actually be together, stay together, because it's cold. And then it's time, of course, for storytelling, of course, for memorizing your ancestors and giving great advice from elder to younger people about life and all the wisdom that society has. So
And
actually,
is this something, Margaret, is this something that people still do now, and young people? And
I think yes, the St. Andrews, this Andrejki we call it. It's actually last day of it's the last day of before Advent, so before this waiting time for Christmas. So this is usually a great party, and we usually do some kind of future prediction, or this matrimonial predictions, love predictions. So we do that. And of course, this tradition of giving food or proposing food to visitors, because these visitors usually, they are, of course, now they are people, they are our friends, but in a tradition there used to be a kolendnicy, which is a group of people who are dressed up for otherworldly creatures, like some kind of goat or death or devil or this kind of otherworldly personas. Came from house to house. They used to go from house to house, singing, storytelling, and saying traditional texts to receive food and to entertain also people living in hosts, and to this strong, to say some gossips, of course, and to make this society bond stronger. So, and now we are doing this rather like visiting, less with this dress ups.
it's amazing. It's almost like the how to be healthy in the winter. Then is a lot around this kind of sense of your ancestors, sense of community.
Definitely, I think this also it brings this kind of, for me, the sense of the time for reflection, for actually a moment to stop and think on the past, on the future. It helps you bring a balance also to your mental health, to your, the whole voices you have in your head. You can just listen to them, manage them in some order, and actually get along with what they're saying.
That's interesting. I was reading something about connection, with the trees and with nature and all the seasons, and how summer is a time when you can bloom and put yourself out there, and winter, really, you need to winter, and everything becomes a bit more internal, or just let it settle.
Definitely, and I see definitely as a time for reflection.
Lovely. Sarah, then what about you? If we move east, tell us about some Persian traditions.
Before I do, I feel a little bit out of my comfort zone, in that you both just sound like such experts of your countries with so much knowledge, and it's wonderful to hear all this. I'm not an expert, but I think I can bring a slightly different perspective, which is how the traditions lasted. With being a first generation British born Persian. So both my parents were from Iran, and so were their parents. But they moved here. So I was born here in England. And a lot of the traditions that obviously are very ancient from Persia, actually, have still managed to cross the seas and come through to England, where we have a huge community of Iranians. And whilst you were both speaking, for some reason, what sprung to my mind was this memory of my mother, and I'd completely forgotten she used to do this. She was always reading the coffee or the tea that we would drink. And you're nodding. Perhaps we all share this. There was this great superstition, always about her and my grandma, which obviously is from ancient times. You've both spoken about the forces of evil around the winter solstice, and the wanting of the sun to rise, to start coming back. And superstition was a huge part of my growing up. My mum was always saying, if it rains, don't go outside. If you're ill, you have to eat watermelon. It's the only thing that's going to cure you. So much was based on this, but it's the way she brought me up, and a lot of it feeds through into the way I'm raising my son, which is all just so interesting. So I think that speaking about seasons and how they affect us in different countries, the seasons in this country, in England, are so different to the seasons in Iran, but the customs and traditions that were practiced there have still come through, and I pretty much practice those more than British ones, more than English ones. So I do eat the watermelon in the midwinter when I probably shouldn't. We have an Ayurvedic doctor in our team who probably recommends me not to, but somehow culturally and traditionally it still feels like the right thing to do, and maybe on some level it's keeping me emotionally healthy. Would you like me to share about the winter solstice in Iran?
Please, yeah.
So we call it Shab-e Yalda, and it's in its ancient tradition. I'll speak about that first because nowadays it's celebrated for different reasons, but the original reason was to commemorate the triumph of the sun god, called Mitra. And I found a little bit of information about Mitra. Mitra, in ancient Indo-Iranian mythology, is the god of light, whose cult spread from India in the east to as far west as Spain, Great Britain and Germany. The Indian Mitra was essentially a solar deity representing the friendly aspect of the sun. And so too was the Persian derivative Mitra, who was a benevolent god and the bestower of health, wealth, and food. And those last three things, health, wealth, and food, I think is what has stayed. So nowadays, people on Shab-e Yalda, which is more or less around the 21st of December, commemorate being together, commemorate community, commemorate this night, which in the past would have been to keep away the evil forces. We'll stay up all night, just in case some evil should bestow upon us. And now it's about coming together on this night and celebrating being families, being a community, sharing of food that they would have spent weeks, if not months, preparing, harvesting, special nuts that they roast and spice in a certain way, pomegranate, which is the jewel of the country. It's if you're not familiar with pomegranate, I recommend you go to any supermarket that sells them nowadays and just cut it in half, and you see these lovely little gems that have been given to us, and also the sharing of poetry. So most Iranians will have on their bookshelves some Hafez, which is the most beloved and most revered of all poets in Iran, and they will read and recite poetry. So the reading and recitation of poetry in Iran is very usual. It's very normal for most Iranians to be able to do this, and also just to share in being with their elders. They generally go to the home of the grandparents and have this celebration. And I'll just finish with one other thing, which is that it's rooted in the ancient religion of Zoroastrianism. You can Google that, Zoroastrianism, but it's basically its importance to talk about now is that it was about fire. So on this special night, people would make fires in their gardens, and we used to do this here in England, and you have to jump over the fire. So that acts like using the body to actually do this ritual, which Magazati was speaking about, rituals, makes it become real and present and mean something in today's world.
Amazing. It's so nice listening to you, because it kind of makes this gloomy midwinter into a festival, an exciting kind of evening. I want to come to a solstice celebration. And thank you, Sarah. Before we finish, maybe I could just ask you each, for people now listening who maybe don't like winter or find it very dark and cold and beyond a daylight saving lamp get a bit down, what tips would you give them based on either the ancient traditions or something you found for yourself to be more in harmony with winter?
Oh, well, I like food, and comfort food. But something I like foraging and picking berries in the late summer and spring. And if you can do that in the season beforehand, before winter comes, which you can preserve, you can freeze, or you can make a preserve, a conserve, or dry them, simple, and then bring them out in the winter again when things are a bit gloomy. And I'm now eating my wild raspberries, which I picked, and I've made some lovely conserve with the wild raspberries. And I sit there and I make some pancakes or waffles and use that, and I feel I'm tasting and smelling that association I have again with the feeling from them, bringing it into the dark of the winter in front of a fireplace, reading a good book, or listening to some music. And it's the senses, it's getting the senses again back into my memory, and enjoying it, as well as, of course, going outside and running about. But there's also lovely inside hygge, kurselig, as we say in Norwegian. Yeah. And lots of candles. That's the other thing we do up here. Lots of candles.
Yes. Something so comforting about a candle. Magazati, yes.
Yeah, I can only add to that if you can, of course, then ask someone in. Of course, pandemic is a little harsh on that. Or even try to Zoom your friends and actually have some fun. I mean, tell jokes, tell funny stories. Try to remember the old good things that happened during the year. Maybe some pranks you did with best friends, and actually try to remember all the happy moments and actually share that with whoever you can.
Good advice. Sarah?
Well, when you asked that question, Julia, I thought, I need some advice on that front, because it was only yesterday morning I stepped outside and it was foggy and it was cold and I was feeling miserable, and I didn't do very well at dealing with it. But in hindsight, I think what would really help on these cold, foggy, very what we would normally call miserable days is to recognize that something in us resists it. We don't want it. We don't want to accept it. We want something different. And I'm sure you can relate to that in other areas of your life. Mostly the disharmony arises within us when we don't just accept something. And so try it the next time, maybe when you step out on a cold, foggy day, to just stand there for just a few seconds, maybe even 10 seconds, and just say to yourself, I accept that this is how it is. And perhaps something different might happen. You may notice a bit of mist in a shape that you haven't noticed before, or you may notice a cobweb that you wouldn't have noticed with the sun sparkling on it. And then you might be able to start breathing again and re-find yourself, realign yourself. So I'd say acceptance, but I also love what the other two shared. I'd certainly call someone, make contact with someone who you've possibly neglected because you feel like you haven't had time. Make the time to do that, and also use your body. Don't let it curl inwards and contract. Use your body, so stretch, move, walk, and befriend somebody.
And on the closing note, I would also say sleeping is really okay. So let yourself sleep if you need to.
Great advice. There's so much here and so much to explore. I think just going outside, accepting it, coming back, having a waffle, and telling a joke with a friend. I hope there's something interesting there. And thank you so much, Anne, Malgorzata, and Sarah, for sharing all of that with us today.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you for being invited. Yeah, thank you.